I remember the smell of the damp pavement the day she left me, the day my own blood decided I was a burden they could no longer carry. They thought they were throwing away a broken child, but 17 years is a long time for a ghost to find her way home. Now, there's a frantic knocking at my door, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the power has shifted. The world doesn't end with a bang. For me, it ended with the sound of a car door slamming shut and the fading taillights of a silver sedan. I was 10 years old, clutching a tattered backpack that contained my entire life, 2 pairs of socks, a drawing notebook with no pencil, and a picture of my mother that was already beginning to fade at the edges. My Aunt Clara didn't look back. She didn't even offer a fake apology. She simply drove away from the outskirts of a town I didn't recognize, leaving me standing in front of a gray building that smelled of industrial bleach and forgotten hope. I was Lily Rose, a name that sounded far too delicate for the girl I had to become that night. The state system is a meat grinder. If you are careful, it will strip away every bit of softness you have left. I learned quickly that tears were a currency no one traded in. I spent my teenage years moving from one foster home to another, always the quiet one, always the girl who kept her head down and her grades perfect. While other kids were out making memories, I was calculating. I was calculating how to never ever be at the mercy of someone else's kindness again. By the time I was 22, I had 3 jobs and a scholarship that barely covered my rent. I lived on black coffee and the burning desire to prove that the 10-year-old girl on the sidewalk hadn't died that day. Before we continue with how I built my empire from the ashes of that abandonment, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? And what time is it for you? Let me know in the comments. I love reading where these stories travel to. 17 years pass like a blur of cold mornings and late-night spreadsheets. Now at 27, I sit in an office that overlooks the city. I own the building, I own the firm, I own my time. My name, Lily Rose, is no longer just a name on a foster care file. It's a brand. I had forgotten what Aunt Clara's voice sounded like. I had buried the memory of her face under layers of success and expensive silk. But life has a funny way of circling back, doesn't it? It started with a phone call, an unknown number, then an email, then finally, a physical presence. I was sitting in my living room on a Tuesday evening, the fireplace crackling, when the security intercom buzzed. I glanced at the monitor. A woman stood there, shivering in a coat that had seen better decades. Beside her was a man I vaguely recognized as my cousin, Leo, the boy who used to hide my toys and laugh when I cried. They looked small, they looked desperate, and they had no idea that the woman behind the camera was the same little girl they had discarded like trash in the rain. I watched them through the high-definition lens of the security camera for a long time. I wanted to see if I could find a trace of the woman who had looked at a terrified 10-year-old and felt nothing. But time hadn't been kind to Clara. Her face was a roadmap of bitterness and bad decisions. And Leo, the boy who used to take up all the space in the room, now looked like a man who had spent his life running from shadows. I pressed the button to open the gates, not because I felt pity, but because I wanted to see the exact moment the realization hit them. When my assistant led them into the main foyer, I didn't get up. I stayed seated behind my mahogany desk, the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows casting a long, intimidating shadow. I let the silence stretch. It's a trick I learned in boardrooms. Silence makes people reveal their weaknesses. "Can we help you?" my assistant asked, her voice professional and sharp. We're looking for the owner. We heard this firm handles private equity," Clara stammered. She was twisting her purse straps so tight, her knuckles were white. "We were told a Miss Rose is in charge." I slowly turned my chair around. I had traded my pigtails for a sharp bob and my tattered backpack for a designer suit. I looked nothing like the girl on the sidewalk. Yet as soon as our eyes met, I saw a flicker of something in Clara's expression. A ghost of a memory. "I am Lily Rose," I said. My voice was steady, like a blade. "And I don't recall having an appointment with you." Leo stepped forward, trying to put on a mask of confidence that didn't fit him. Look, Lily, if that's really you, we're in a bit of a spot. The family house is under foreclosure. The business, well, things happened. We heard you did well for yourself. We thought, family sticks together. Family. The word felt like ash in my mouth. Family? I leaned back, folding my hands. That's a very interesting choice of words, Leo, especially coming from the people who dropped a child off at a state facility and changed their phone numbers the next day. The color drained from Clara's face. She let out a small, choked gasp. Lily, it really is you? Oh, thank heavens. You have to understand, things were so hard back then. We were broke, and your mother's debts. Stop, I interrupted. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. Don't bring my mother into this. You didn't leave me because of debt. You left me because I was an inconvenience. You traded my childhood for a fresh start. We were wrong, Clara cried out, moving toward the desk, before my security detail stepped into her path. We've regretted it every day. We've been looking for you. It was a lie. A beautiful, desperate lie. I knew for a fact they hadn't looked for me. I had kept tabs on them for years, watching them spend what little inheritance my mother had left behind, while I was scrubbing floors to pay for textbooks. You weren't looking for me when you bought that beach house in 19, I said, watching her eyes go wide as she realized I knew everything. And you weren't looking for me when you told the neighbors I had moved away to live with distant relatives in Europe. You're looking for me now because the money has run out and the walls are closing in. Leo looked at the expensive art on my walls, his greed finally overtaking his shame. Look, you're rich now. What's a few $100,000 to you? It's pocket change. We're your only living relatives, Lily. You can't just let us sleep on the street. I stood up slowly, walking over to the window. Below us, the city was bustling, indifferent to the drama unfolding in this room. You're right, Leo, I whispered, not turning around. I am very rich. And you're right about something else. I know exactly what it's like to have nowhere to go and no one to call. I turned back to them, a small, chilling smile playing on my lips. The difference is when I was on the street, I was a child. You're adults, and I think it's time you learned the lesson you tried to teach me 17 years ago. The room felt like it had lost all its oxygen. Clara was trembling, and Leo's bravado was beginning to crack like dry earth. They expected me to scream, to cry, or perhaps to write a check just to make the ghosts go away. They didn't expect me to be calm. I'm not a monster, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I sat back down and pulled a thick folder from my desk drawer. I understand that the house is scheduled for auction in 3 days. I also know that, Leo, you've managed to rack up quite a bit of personal debt that the bank is tired of ignoring. Leo swallowed hard. How do you... I pay people to know things, Leo. It's a habit you develop when you grow up trusting no one. I slid a document across the mahogany surface. I'm prepared to pay off the foreclosure. I'll clear the debts. I'll even provide a monthly stipend that will keep you both very comfortable for the rest of your lives. Clara let out a sob of relief, reaching for my hand across the desk. I pulled back before she could touch me. Her eyes were wet with performative gratitude. Oh, Lily, I knew your heart was still in there. I knew you'd remember us. Wait for the condition, Clara, I said, cutting her off. There is always a condition. The room went silent again. Leo narrowed his eyes. What kind of condition? We're family, Lily. You shouldn't be playing games. The condition is simple. To receive this help, you must sign over the deed to the family estate to my holding company. Everything. The house, the land, the memories. And then, I paused, leaning forward until I could see the desperation in their pores. You will move into the small caretaker's cottage at the back of the property. You will work as the groundskeepers for the new owner. Will be paid a fair wage, but you will never step foot inside the main house again, unless it is to clean it. The color left Leo's face. You want us to be servants in our own home? It's not your home, I corrected him. It's the bank's home. In 72 hours, it will be the street's home. I'm offering you a roof and a way to earn your keep. It's more than you gave me when you handed me that backpack at 10 years old. Clara looked horrified. Lily, you can't be serious. We're your elders. People will talk. Let them talk, I shrugged. You can take the deal and have security, or you can walk out that door and see if your pride can keep you warm at night. You have 10 minutes to decide. My assistant has the pens ready. I stood up and walked to the door, leaving them in the heavy silence of my office. I didn't need to wait 10 minutes. I knew exactly what they would do. People who abandon children for convenience are the same people who will trade their dignity for a paycheck. I stood by the water cooler in the hallway, watching the clock. At the 9-minute mark, my assistant walked out with the signed papers. They signed, Miss Rose, she whispered. Good, I said, a cold fire burning in my chest. Call the contractors. I want the main house gutted. Every memory of them, every piece of furniture they sat on, every carpet they walked on. Get rid of it. We're going to turn that house into something they never thought possible. But what they didn't know was that the caretaker's cottage wasn't just a place to live. It was the front row seat to the final act of my plan. The moving day was a spectacle of irony. I arrived in a black SUV, watching from behind tinted windows as Clara and Leo hauled their meager belongings into the cramped, 2-room cottage at the edge of the estate. The main house, the grand Victorian, where they had spent 17 years living on the ghost of my mother's inheritance, was now swarming with workers in white hazmat suits. They watched, bewildered, as their velvet sofas were tossed into a dumpster. They saw their gilded mirrors shattered and thrown away like junk. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking on the gravel. Clara ran toward me, her face smudged with dust. Lily, what is this? The workers say they have orders to destroy everything. That piano belonged to your grandmother. It belonged to a family that died a long time ago, I said, not slowing my pace. Today, this house begins its new life. Over the next month, I made sure they felt every bit of their new reality. Every morning at 6:00 a.m., my estate manager would knock on their cottage door. They were assigned to pull weeds, scrub the stone fountain, and polish the brass gates they once used to lock the world out. I watched them from the balcony of the main house, sipping tea, as they bent over the soil in the heat of the afternoon. Leo tried to revolt once. He walked up to the front door, sweating and red-faced, demanding to speak to me. I'm not doing it anymore, Lily, he yelled. This is manual labor. We're your family, not your slaves. I walked out onto the porch, looking down at him. You're right, Leo. You aren't slaves, you're employees. And if you're resigning, that's perfectly fine. But remember, your resignation also cancels the debt relief contract. I'll call the bank right now and tell them the deal is off. Where will you go? I hear the shelters are quite full this time of year. He went silent. The defiance drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, desperate fear. He picked up his shears and went back to the hedges. But the true blow came a week later. I invited the local press and several community leaders to the estate for a grand opening. Clara and Leo were ordered to serve drinks and appetizers, dressed in modest uniforms. They moved through the crowd, heads bowed, serving people they used to look down upon. I stood at the top of the grand staircase and made the announcement. Most of you know this property as the Rose Estate, I told the crowd. But as of today, it has a new name. It is now the Lily Rose Foundation for Displaced Children. This house will no longer be a private residence. It is being converted into a luxury transition home and scholarship center for kids who have been aged out of the foster care system. No child will ever be abandoned on a sidewalk while I have breath in my lungs. The applause was deafening. I looked down and caught Clara's eye. She was holding a tray of champagne, tears streaming down her face, not out of joy, but out of the sheer realization of what she had lost. She was living in the shadow of her own cruelty, forced to witness the very thing she tried to destroy become my greatest legacy. She had abandoned a child to save a house. Now, the house was being used to save thousands of children, and she was just the woman who pulled the weeds in the garden. The foundation thrived. The halls that once echoed with the cold silence of Clara's greed were now filled with the laughter of children who finally had a place to call home. I made sure every child had a backpack, not a tattered one, but a brand new one, filled with everything they could ever need to succeed. One rainy evening, exactly 1 year after the opening, I found Clara sitting on the porch of the caretaker's cottage. She looked older than her years, her hands calloused from the gardening she now did daily. She didn't look like the woman who had slammed that car door 17 years ago. She just looked tired. "Why are you doing this, Lily?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You have the money. You have the fame. Why keep us here? Why make us watch you give away everything we worked for?" I sat on the steps, looking out at the rain. "You didn't work for any of this, Clara. You stole it from a dead woman and a helpless child. I keep you here because I want you to see what family actually looks like. It's not about blood. It's about who shows up when the world gets dark." I stood up and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a one-way ticket to a small town across the country, and a modest sum of money, enough for a fresh start, but nothing more. "The debt is paid," I said. "The house is secure. The children are safe. My work here with you is done. You can stay and work the grounds, or you can take this and go. But if you leave, don't ever look back. Because if you ever knock on my door again, I won't be the 10-year-old girl waiting for a ride. I'll be the woman who knows exactly how to close the door." Clara looked at the ticket, then at the grand house glowing with light in the distance. She realized then that her punishment wasn't the manual labor or the small cottage. Her punishment was knowing that the child she threw away had become the person she could never be. As I walked back to the main house, I heard a car engine start. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. For the first time in 17 years, the weight was gone. I walked through the front doors of the Lily Rose Foundation, where a group of kids were busy drawing in the lounge. One little girl looked up and smiled. "Are you staying for dinner, Lily?" I smiled back, feeling a warmth no designer suit could ever provide. "Yes," I said. "I'm finally home." Do you think Lily was too harsh on her family, or did they get exactly what they deserved? If you loved this story of justice and healing, hit that subscribe button for more Lily Calm stories.